So I'm Xan Winterton. I head up the North America branch at LMRE, and we're a specialist real estate technology recruitment firm. And today we're joined by Ginny Miller. So Ginny, welcome. Great to have you on board.
Great to be here.
Yeah, great to get started. So I guess what we'll do is, if you can give a little bit of an introduction to yourself, your professional background, and also the firm that you're working at and kind of what you do there. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, awesome. It's really great to be here. I have been working in and around the PropTech space, formally for the past couple of years, but like to say in some ways I was born into PropTech. I grew up in Silicon Valley, surrounded by folks working in the tech and venture world. But my family was involved in real estate and kind of always saw this fascinating gap between, what was happening within the real estate and built world space, and then what was happening kind of in the dawn of the internet era as I was growing up. My original background was actually in engineering, studied engineering in undergrad, and was focused on clean tech and clean energy, which again was kind of the OG PropTech in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And then decided I liked people too much, so didn't want to be an engineer long-term, and went into consulting and did product design and development consulting, and kept getting sucked into things on the built world side of things. So focused on some senior living projects, working on some new kind of software and development projects and products for developers, and just became fascinated by the opportunities in the space. Went back to business school while I was there, refocused most of my energy on trying to understand what opportunities were happening at the intersection of real estate and tech, and kind of the right time, right place. It was right when a lot of large real estate organizations were taking PropTech seriously. And I got connected with a firm called Jamestown that was looking to build out their own corporate venture arm and partnership arm focused on technology. And so that's what I had been doing the past couple of years. Jamestown is a vertically integrated owner operator, known for properties like Chelsea Market in New York or Levi's Plaza in San Francisco, and has a global presence. And at Jamestown, I ran the corporate venture arm, so investing in technology as well as in technology funds. So we're LPs and funds like Fifth Wall, and also partnerships. So taking that technology and figuring out how to deploy it across the portfolio. Through that, just became more and more ingrained in the kind of small but growing venture and tech ecosystem, and ended up meeting this phenomenal entrepreneur in the space, Gregor Watson, who's behind companies like Roofstock and Zebo and Lesson. And he has been investing in the space for the past decade and building companies in the space. And I think, notice that while there is more and more activity, much of it is focused on later stage companies or focused on commercial. And he sees a really interesting gap, or saw a really interesting gap at the super early stages, and rolling your sleeves up and helping entrepreneurs build during the 0 to 1. And so I joined him about a couple months ago to launch a new venture fund that's focused on early stage PropTech.
Yeah, super exciting. Do you think that you always had your sights on VC? Because I guess at Jamestown you were suddenly like really getting into learning a bit more about like the technology and working probably with startups. Did you already know at some point that you were going to be ending up at VC? Because I guess the consultancy background as well is like quite in tune with some of the people that end up at VC, or was it something that just developed naturally?
It's so interesting. As I kind of alluded to before, I feel extremely fortunate that I grew up around many people that worked in VC, which I think is kind of isolated to having grown up in Silicon Valley. But I think as a result of that, I think was very much like not necessarily wanting to go. I was like, that's not for me. I don't know. I like to build. I like to kind of design and think through strategy, and but was not actively ever pursuing VC. And I think that kind of over time, though, I passively realized that the things that I liked to do were getting to know people, helping people, meeting with entrepreneurs and deriving energy from that and trying to connect dots in as many ways as I could. And started to realize that like, oh, actually a lot of that aligns with venture, and a lot of that aligns with the people that I grew up with and loved having conversations with, who were just so curious and energized to support entrepreneurship. And so I really didn't think that I was kind of, actively going to go down this route, but the more that I got closer to it, the more that I started to connect dots that it was potentially a good fit.
Yeah. And it sounds like this was almost like perfect timing. You come in, early on. I guess this is where we bridge to the next question, but to learn more about, because I guess from our side, we work with lots of early stage PropTechs. We also work with a number of VCs, and we like to make introductions where appropriate. So it's always good to understand, I guess, what the like investment thesis is for like your VC firm, and what stage you usually invest at. So maybe you can speak a little bit about the sorts of companies that you will be looking into. And you mentioned it earlier that, around that early stage.
Yeah. So we sort of think about it in a couple of ways. In terms of scope of the types of companies we're looking at, we're already narrowing the potential pool by saying that we're focused on built world tech. So by that, we mean companies that change how we experience and access real estate in the built world, and then companies that change how we kind of own, invest, and manage. And then the other kind of narrowing factor is early stage. So we're looking at kind of pre-revenue and early stage seed deals. So kind of pre-seed, seed, some potential kind of Series A deals, but really the thought being that we want to invest where we could be most valuable and kind of align the skills and the platform that we have to the needs of the entrepreneurs. And we see a lot of that at the earliest stages, where we have entrepreneurial backgrounds, we have design and development backgrounds. The 1Sharpe platform has a credit and debt fund as well, which we see being really helpful to folks kind of during those earliest stages of capital markets formation and strategy. So those are two big limiting factors. Then within that, we're really excited by businesses that are more kind of the picks and shovels type businesses that are powering the infrastructure, the data, the software, the marketplaces, API businesses that are really creating the rails for the real estate industry to change, or for the PropTech industry to take off. So, if you think about what Shopify did for e-commerce and enabling a whole ecosystem and market to build off of that, we see a lot of parallels to entire new kind of economies and experiences being developed in the built world. And we want to invest in the infrastructure powering that.
Right. So like home ownership, like how people are able to get onto the property ladder, that's kind of would be an avenue for you guys.
Yes, exactly. Homeownership is a great, there is so much you could do to transform the way that we own and access housing. And you could just think about an entire economy that's built off of home equity, accessing financing for homes and being able to use that financing more readily, and improving the home ownership, buying, selling process through technology that reduces friction and brings automation. And so, yeah.
And in terms of, I guess, you guys, as 1Sharpe, because you're going to be at that early stage for these firms, I imagine there's going to be it's a very hands-on approach that you're going to be going after. So when you sit down with one of these, startups, are you really saying, right, come into the office, or I guess virtually at the moment, and saying, right, let's figure out what your strategy is going to be over the course of, 4, 6, 9 months? Or is it going to be, let's test the product that you've got with, an existing portfolio that we know is, trying to solve this problem? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah. So the beauty is that both myself and Gregor, and then actually many folks across the 1Sharpe platform on the private equity side and credit side, have acted as advisors to startups in the past. And so there's this organic deal flow of, if you're genuinely helpful and you really have rolled up your sleeves and helped founders solve and think through challenging problems. And I think that there's going to be this accelerant in them kind of coming to us in some ways and wanting to work with us. And I think that right now, it's a little tricky if it's in person or virtual or whatever it is, but our approach, we're actually in the process of fundraising. So we're doing some investments, but we're mostly focused on kind of getting the fund up and running. And then in the meantime, just spending a lot of time getting to know founders, being as helpful as possible, setting up, for now, maybe a 30-minute Zoom and asking the hard questions and then connecting dots to potential customers or partners. I think over time, we plan to be the types of investors where like you can text us at any hour of the day and we'll do our best to come up with a solution, or we'll open up our Rolodex to the companies we invest in to be truly just like as helpful as possible in connecting dots. And
always wondered, I guess, in terms of when you're evaluating these potential portfolio companies, from the outside, every founder you meet is changing the world with their technology. How do you actually figure out who's likely to be successful and who perhaps isn't? What sort of, maybe you can walk us through the process that you guys go through to, I don't know, dig into the details and really find out who's, the winners and losers, I guess. And I know we all know that it's a, a gamble.
At the earliest stage, who knows? It's so interesting. And I can't speak to this as well as like nearly anyone who's worked in venture for a long time. But to me, so much of it seems to be pattern recognition. And that's where I think some of the best investors just have been doing this and talk to thousands of founders, and they kind of can recognize more of an art than a science. Some of those like X factors that make it such that someone is really going to break through walls and build something big. And I think that, so I try and take my advice from folks who have been in the industry for 10 plus years and can speak to those patterns. I won't pretend to speak to them myself, but I think a lot of it is developing some frameworks. So, having some basic framework for thinking through, what are the barriers to entry going to be for competitors to come to the space? What's the moat and defensibility? And does that compound over time? How is this company going to acquire customers? How much is that going to cost? How is that cost going to change over time? And then, what's the lifetime value of a customer that they can acquire? How is does this person have, I think this is a huge one. Does this founder or founding team have the ability to hire exceptional people? Like, do people really want to go work for this person? And I think in those earliest days, right, like the first hires are so critical. And so just thinking through who's going to work for this company and like, why do they want to get out of bed in the morning and are excited to, or inspired by this founder or this vision. And I think kind of spending time on some of those frameworks can be helpful. And then at the end of the day, a lot of it is like a relationship thing. And it's just, do we feel like this is a marriage that we're excited about and can be something we'll be in with together for the next 10 years, because realistically, you're in it for the long haul. Yeah,
exactly. And it's so interesting. I think that when you speak to people about their journey, going to becoming like a larger startup or company, one of the main things that comes out is like, oh, what were some of the mistakes that you made? And it does sometimes go back to the hiring, like, oh, we made this wrong hire, or it just wasn't the right fit, which actually puts you back quite a few months. But when you get it right, it's a complete game changer. So that process is key, and that also, I think, depending on what stage you're investing in, that can swing a team or a firm to invest, the people that you've got around you, because I think you can have great founders.
Absolutely.
And that's crucial, but then who they hire next is also is massive.
Yes.
And I guess aside from the companies that you guys are investing in, and more in terms of insight for, I guess, the candidates that we work with, because we often get asked questions like, I'm looking to get into the VC space, or I'm really interested in this. I guess you haven't taken, a typical route to end up in VC, but what would be your advice, candidates who are maybe thinking about it, or things that they can get involved in that you think would be helpful for them if they were looking to get into the VC space?
I mean, I think the beauty of venture in my limited time working in the space is that there is no typical route, right? And there's a huge spectrum between early stage venture, which is much more, again, about kind of relationships and rolling up your sleeves and helping to build alongside founders, and then growth equity, which can be a completely different skill set. So there's definitely a spectrum of what qualifies you to work in various aspects of this industry. But I think that, again, kind of the beauty is it's really around like building relationships with, folks that I think are in the founder world, in the venture world, and kind of honestly building out like an organic network such that you're just in the mix of hearing exciting things that are going on, being curious, asking questions, trying to understand what excites you about the space, and then kind of connecting dots between, potential investors and founders, and just seeing if that's something that you like to do. And then I think that the other cool thing about venture is you can do it, potentially in an angel capacity, or you can syndicate deals for other angels or other investors without having to formally work for a fund. And I think that can be a really powerful way to dip your toes in the space before actually working in it formally. So, seeing if you have friends that are starting companies that you might want to invest in or help them raise money, and just kind of starting to get in the mix more organically, I think can be that's how it seems many folks in the industry kind of get their start is through angel investing.
Yeah, that's interesting. And final question. So what are the objectives, I guess, for 2021?
Yes. So we're launching this fund. So I think the big objective is raise the fund, close the fund, and then start to invest. But I think that 2020 was such a year of rebuilding and rethinking the entire real estate and PropTech industry. I think in some ways people were kind of on defense in a way in 2020, and 2021 is more about going on offense and being proactive about all the incredible entrepreneurial opportunities that have come out of kind of the vacuum that's been created over the past year. And so I think my goal is to just be as curious and open-minded as possible over the next year, and build out like, an incredible network of potential founders in the space that want to change real estate. It's a vague goal, but that's more tactically. We'll raise the fund. We'll probably bring on one more team member, I'm sure, over the next year, and and really kind of make a splash in the market, hopefully.
Yeah. It seems like you guys have timed it well. You mentioned like last year it was sort of quite an introvert time, a lot of thinking about what's going to be next, and now there's so much opportunity and everyone's really getting after it. I guess that the difficulty for you will be figuring out who to go with, but that's part of the excitement.
And